Alrighty, today we're going to work with color. First I'd like to start out with a sphere here. And if we click on File, New Material, or if we double click, we can get a texture here. And you'll notice in the colors right here, it brings up this color table automatically. What you're probably seeing is the RGB color, and you're also probably not seeing the quick storage. So we can enable that. You can click on this little button and bring up the enhanced color table. Or we can also have that come up with every color attribute by default. If we go into Units, and under Color System, we can go to Enhanced Color Table, which is probably RGB colored by default. We go to Enhanced Color Table and check this Show Quick Storage. We have the quick storage available to us. And to store colors, we can just choose the color we want, and then Control-click in any one of these fields, and we'll have our color that we need, that we stored. Now you'll notice that this is fairly limited. This is what the texture field is for, and you'll notice that quite a few of these things have a texture field. Transparency has a texture field, bump, alpha. They all have these texture fields, and anything you can put under the color attribute, anything you can put under texture, you can put the same texture field in any of those different attributes that we just showed you here, that I just showed you. So you'll notice that the color is pretty limited. Also notice the brightness here. And this is actually how bright your color is. Usually you probably want that at 100% most of the time. Alright, now let's take a look at the texture attributes. Oh, my screen recorder is cutting off the rest of that. If you double click on this, you'll get a different dialog, which has more or less the same stuff on it, but I think we'll go ahead and use this. So actually, a lot of times I actually do prefer this dialog. Everything is conveniently listed to the side here. You can just check mark it, and then there it is. You can start messing with it. So it's really convenient. I mean, it's available here, but it's also available here. Probably a little bit easier to use sometimes. Alright, if we click on texture, notice all these different attributes we have. Load presets. So you can also save a preset, and this is a preset I've saved. I usually use this for UV texturing. Tiles is very nice to use. It'll tell you how even your UV maps are, but we're going to go over that a little bit later. But first, let's go over. Okay, first we got color, which is more or less exactly the same thing. We got a Fresnel, which is kind of like a gradient here. You can change how it works. Not something I use very often. You might have to experiment with that, but probably not going to go over all of these. Mainly probably gradient and noise, and color is pretty obvious, and layer for the most part. And then you got these other things you can apply, like filter, kind of like a Photoshop filter. Then you also got effects and surfaces. These are just all the different things that are available to you. Quite a bit, but I'm just going to go over a few basic things. First, the gradient, I think, for the most part. And to apply textures, you can either click and drag onto your object, or if we Control Z and undo that, you can click and drag on your object in the outline view here, and it'll also apply it. But notice you don't want to continually do that, otherwise you will start stacking your textures one on top of another. And unless you're actually restricting your textures to a certain selection and need more than one texture tag, that is not recommended. So please do try to remember to keep just one tag for one texture that's on your object. Alright, so now we see the gradient. We can kind of see how that's working out. Control R to render that and see what it kind of looks like. Change these attributes, whether it's diagonal, circular, star, or just all these different attributes we have. And you can click down on this little arrow, and you can actually have absolute control over the position of these things. So we slide that, change the color, so we could make a little rainbow if we wanted to. And we can also right click on here and we can invert it, which will just swap them. Or we could double the knots, so we have twice as many. So just some of the many things you can do. Also notice that it's just showing up right here. Has quite a bit to do with UV mapping, but you can also change the orientation of the gradient. Notice it shows up on each side there. Now it shows up how it looks. And of course that mainly has to do with UV mapping and how it's placed on there. If we click on the texture tag, we'll notice all these options. Projection is UVW mapping, which is dependent on the UVs that are mapped out. Of course right now we really don't have any, but we can change it. We can change it to cubic. And I'll talk a little bit more about these, and this will make a lot more sense later. Frontal is actually what you're seeing in the viewport, so you notice that the flat texture is on the viewport and we're just moving around it as we move our object. And you can actually map that to the object if you so wanted to, which I've done. It's a good way to prevent from actually having to UV map something if it isn't really necessary. So sometimes it can definitely come in handy. But that's the gradient. And also you have other options. You have turbulence. You can click cycle. If you'd like to also see this bigger, if we right click, we can change the size with small, medium, or huge, so we can actually see a better preview of what we're actually getting here. So that kind of looks like one of those infrared infrared view of something there. Kind of neat looking. You can change the number of octaves you have. This makes a really big difference on some other attributes other than just. Notice this cycle. If we actually click, we can actually animate this thing. We actually change the frequency. Yeah, maybe lower that a little bit. But notice that you can actually animate these textures, which is pretty wild. So just something to keep in mind, that you can actually make the textures move and actually see what they look like for different frames, that they'll actually change. So that's the first frame, and those are the later frames. So there's quite a few options. It's quite a bunch of crazy stuff you can do. Of course, that's just the gradient now. And if we go back here, we can clear this, and then we can stop animating that. And let's go over some of these other options here.